Welcome to Mom Boss Central. I'm your host, Alexia Hoffman. This podcast is where entrepreneurial moms like you and me come together for real and raw conversations filled with practical tips, genuine stories, and a whole lot of girl power. But it's not just about listening, it's about building a community. If you haven't already, make sure to join at mombosscentral.com. So whether you're sipping on a cup of coffee, pouring yourself a glass of wine, or tuning in on the go, get ready to join the conversation and become part of our supportive Mom Boss Central community. All right, I'm here with Yesim Nicholson. Welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you. Will you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell them a little bit about you and your family and your business.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially exciting as it's a new podcast. So congratulations for getting it off the ground to start with. So I'm
Thank you.
Yesim. I work with people who are in jobs that they're not enjoying, and I help them to make changes to their careers so that they have much more fun and find much more meaning in what they do. I tend to work with people who are in midlife, but actually it's not limited to people in midlife. I've worked with all sorts of people. Love what I do. I get to coach people on a one-to-one basis, but I also do great group coaching. And I have my own podcast called Your Big Career Move, where I talk to people who've made big, scary career moves. That's what I do in a nutshell. And family-wise, I've been married for long time, 15 years or so. And I've got two gorgeous girls. One is 12 and one is 10.
I love it. Well, so great. So cool to have you on all the way across the pond in the United States over here. So much fun. Tell me a little bit more about how you got into.
Yeah. So I started my career in the corporate world. I used to work for a big multinational, actually an American company, Motorola, I think you call it over there. And I had a good career. I got paid good money. I got to travel the world. I was given a fair bit of responsibility. It was fun, but I did that for a few years, and I sort of started to get itchy feet, and I just had this vision of doing lots of other things. I thought, if I spend my whole life in this corporate job, I'm going to be a bit disappointed in myself that I've just stuck to this one thing. I wanted to be able to experience everything that life had to offer. So I actually started my own e-commerce business back in 2005 when e-commerce was still quite new, but that was really fun. And then we moved around quite a lot, my husband and I. So I sort of reinvented myself every time we moved and set up new businesses and worked for different organizations. And to cut a very long story short, I'm somebody, because I grew up moving around quite a lot. My dad was a hotel manager. So change was sort of part of my DNA. It was different cultures. And so change came very naturally to me. And I started, in particular, getting to midlife, I started to notice that a lot of my friends were stuck in careers that they didn't actually enjoy. And that's putting it mildly. Some were really, really unhappy doing what they were doing, but really scared to make a change. And I was like, maybe this is something I can help with. So I've sort of made it my mission to do that. And I'm loving it.
That's amazing. That's so great. So for our listeners, if there's any moms that have been contemplating taking the plunge of, going full-time on their entrepreneurial passion, whatever that may be, and leaving behind
Well, I think it's different for different people. Everybody has slightly different circumstances, or sometimes very different circumstances. So, I never advocate that people just quit and jump straight into something without giving it too much thought. I mean, that can work. I have seen it work, but I think that's probably quite a stressful way to go about it. I do advocate having some kind of plan of how you're going to cope financially. It's about having those conversations with the people that are likely to be affected by your decision. and your actions. There's so many variables that come into it. But at the end of the day, I think if you feel that you need to be doing something else, if you have a passion for something else, if you just feel that you have this, I don't know, this fire in your belly that you just need to follow, then you just have to do it, because I think there's nothing worse than getting to the end of your life and regretting stuff that you haven't done.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. So you said that you don't advocate just, you know, quitting your job without giving it some thought. So what kind of questions should, that mom, that entrepreneur be asking themselves?
Yeah, I mean, the really obvious one is the financial thing. So, if you are not going to earn any money for the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months, are you going to be
Mm,
okay? Is your spouse going to be able to support you financially? Do you have savings that you can use? Um, Things like that, because sometimes businesses take longer than we think to get off the ground, and I'm sure you've experienced this
yeah.
yourself, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you've been hugely successful from day one, but my experience is that with most businesses it takes a little while to build up. So if you have a financial
Yeah.
buffer, then it takes the stress out of that situation, because I do see people making the jump without the financial buffer and then really suffering as a result. So that's a
Mm,
really obvious one. And I think, like I said earlier, having those conversations with people who are invested in your happiness, but also, let's say, have their own agenda when it comes to what you're doing, career
mm,
wise. It might be a parent that's invested in your education that might feel really let down if you then just jack it in and decide to do something else. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I'm just saying have those
mm-hmm.
conversations with people that are likely to be affected by your decision, and make sure that you've got people as on board as you can. Um,
Yeah.
but it's also doing the research. It's talking to people who are already doing what you want to do. It's finding sort of role models that whose life and career you'd like to emulate. It's I don't know, skilling up if you need to. It's maybe volunteering in the area that you want to get into, just so you can get a feel for it. There's loads and loads of things that you could and probably should be doing. I don't like the word should, but I think it's good to do a few things.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that's a great advice. And I think, like you said, to find a role model or somebody that you could speak to about it that has no agenda but can offer, unbiased advice and to really help you ask the hard questions, but in a way that still reaffirms that you can do whatever you're working towards, I think is so, so important. Because I think, if you talk to somebody, like you said, with the wrong mindset, it can almost feel like it's doubt or there's guilt or shame, tied to it. But to find someone who's unbalanced but can ask you those hard questions, I think is important. So with that, with
Definitely.
you
And you're just
starting your
making me
business and
realize that
having kids,
I should have said get somebody who can act as a coach. So
yeah,
either a professional coach if you can afford it, that's awesome. Or somebody who can ask you, exactly like you said, those probing questions in a really supportive way, in a very non-judgmental way. It needs to be somebody that really has your best interest at heart, who doesn't have any biases when it comes to whatever decision you make. So they're not emotionally invested in whatever you decide. I think it's
yeah.
really, really important to have somebody like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is so important. I know when I got a coach that changed my business, and I had heard about getting a coach for so long. And it was kind of one of those things like, yeah, yeah, I know how great it is, but, and then once I actually did it, to see the results was just amazing. And then my husband was kind of the same as I used to be, like, oh yeah, I know how great it is. I see it's working for you. I don't really need one, blah, blah, blah. And then we went to a conference and he ended up getting a coach, and it like totally changed his life and changed my life. And now that I'm like into coaching as well, it's just so cool to see the results and to see the progress that, you're right. Like, it's easy to make progress without a coach, but I definitely think if you can afford it, it's going to propel you forward so much faster. So if it's in the budget, definitely something to consider. And if it's not in the budget, to find like an accountability partner
Yes.
that can hold you accountable the same way a coach could. And that was part of with the Mom Boss Central community, to have that accountability portion of finding people that are like-minded, that are also moms, also entrepreneurs, that can help push you forward without a huge financial or any financial obligation, but just to have that support makes a huge difference. But with your business, because you do coaching as well, how has it been for you adjusting to?
Yeah, I mean, I think if any parent tells you that it's easy to be a parent and a business owner, I think they're lying. I think it's,
Yeah.
the
Yep,
I
I
think
agree.
even if you're a stay-at-home parent, I think, parenting full stop is a tough gig. Um,
Yeah.
Rewarding, obviously, but tough, challenging in so many ways.
Mhm.
Um, and I think with regards to be honest, for me, part of the appeal of running my own business is that I can pick and choose my hours, and
Mhm.
I don't have to check in with anybody whether I can, go to my daughter's school play or sports day or, you know,
Yeah.
whatever happens to be going on. So I think, there are pros and cons for sure, but that's a massive, massive advantage, is just being in control of your own time. And, if I want to take the Easter holidays off to spend with my daughters, then I can do that as long as I've set
Yeah.
things up to continue while I'm not there. Um, so yeah, definitely pros and cons, but it's kind of sweet now that they're that little bit older. It's kind of sweet because my 12-year-old in particular, my podcast is available on YouTube, and like most 12-year-olds, she spends quite a lot of time on YouTube. So she's now like, Mom, you shouldn't be doing it that way. I don't know why you uploaded the video like this. You should be doing it like that. And so
Oh my
it's
gosh,
quite
that's so
nice. The
funny.
role has, or the dynamics have changed, so they're kind of,
Yeah.
my 12-year-old definitely sort of starting to, let's say, help me with the business. And she's like, oh, I think that
Yeah.
that image would look better on your Instagram, or whatever. So it's quite nice to have
Oh
that
my gosh.
the critical
That is
eye.
so cool. Yeah.
But it's quite
Yeah.
sweet also
That's
because
great.
yeah, they're kind of my little cheerleaders now. That now that they sort of understand what I do, they're really quite
Oh.
sweet. Like I'm I've just been launching my first book, and they're really sweet. They're coming to the launch party and they're really excited, and they're like,
Oh, how
"Mom, how many
cool.
books have you sold?" So it's, yeah, they're
Yeah.
they're sort of like an extension, not really an extension of the business, but they're sort of like becoming part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so cool. I know that as a mom with littles, it's only like a dream at this point to think about getting my kids involved and showing an interest and being able to incorporate them and have them feel involved would just be so special. So that's awesome to hear that you're getting to live that out, and especially
Yeah,
with all that you're doing with, like you said, YouTube, and to be able to tap into their expertise. It's so funny how it all evolves, and they know so much more than we do so quickly when it comes to certain topics. So I love that.
totally.
Have you found that um, you have been able to feel like you're achieving some work-life balance? I know that you mentioned, the freedom of time, which can be both a blessing and a curse. So do you feel like you're at a place of work-life?
Yeah, I mean, it's about setting boundaries, isn't it? I think I
Mm,
I've been doing this for a while now. I've sort of been self-employed and then employed and then self-employed again. But I
mm-hmm.
think I have enough experience now to know how to get the balance more right than I used to, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
so for
Yeah.
me, it really is about setting the boundaries now. And if I do, if I'm going to do school pickup and then spend an hour with my daughter in the afternoon, then it might mean that I do an hour in the evening. But that's fine.
Mhm.
I'm totally at peace with
Yeah.
that. And I think that's
Yeah.
that's sort of part of it. I think the whole work-life balance, it's so subjective, and I think what works for you won't work for the next person. So it's just working out
Yeah,
what
exactly.
actually works for you. What do you want your home and work life to look like? And
Mhm.
are you happy for them to blur into each other, or do you want to keep them very separate? So it's a very individual thing that I think it's worth spending a bit of time on curating.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so good. For the boundaries that you spoke about, what tips do you have from how you've been able to implement them?
Yeah, I mean, it's like really practical things like, I'll look at my calendar and for example, I try to go to the gym 3 times a week. So for me, it's as simple as blocking out, 2 hours, 3 mornings a week, or an hour, 3 mornings a week. It's in the calendar, it's sort of non-negotiable, and nobody can book anything else in that place. And you can't
Mhm.
book my calendar after school pickup time because then I'm with my kids. So it is about just, I guess, a little bit forward planning and just looking at your week and how you want to allocate each hour of your week, because we all have the same amount of time in the day, right? And it's always a
Yeah,
choice how you spend
exactly.
time.
Yep. Yeah. I think that is such a huge thing that I have realized when people say like, "Oh, I don't know how you do it." It's like, well, I'm not doing anything special, right? I don't have any like special superpowers. I don't have any more time. I do have a lot of help, right? Like I've asked for help, I've found help, I've delegated and learned how to do that, but there's no special secret that someone else has, at least that I've really found. It's all about how you're managing your time and what you're prioritizing, because like you said, you can put that time on your calendar, but if you let someone else say, oh, if you want your, like use your daughter for example, if you let her say, oh mom, I really want to do X, Y, and Z during that time, I mean, that's exactly where the boundary comes in and why it's so important to have that boundary of no, that's my time. Because as soon as you let people in and as soon as that calendar block loses its meaning, at least for me, it's like that's when I fall off the rails. I'm not as productive, I'm not as happy because I'm not doing the things that I need to do. And yet, still, the first thing to come off my calendar are the things for myself a lot of the time. So I love that you brought that up because I think it is so important to remember we have the time we need. It's about what we're prioritizing and the boundaries that we're setting around allowing people into our space and time that we've dedicated for whatever it may be.
Yeah. And I think what you just said about making time for yourself is really important as well. Um, yeah, I think it's Stephen Covey. He wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one of the habits is sharpening the
Mm-hmm.
saw. And he says you can't cut a tree with a blunt saw, and it's the same for us. We can't. Well, we can
Yeah.
operate, but we can't operate particularly productively if we're not looking after ourselves. So I make,
Yeah.
like, not embarrassed to say I take regular naps. It's brilliant because
I
I know
love
that if
that.
I have a 20-minute nap, I'm going to be so much more productive after the nap
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
sort of plowing through and doing a load of work that
Mm.
I'm then going to look at the next day and go, what the hell was I thinking when I wrote this? I don't know, newsletter or whatever.
Yeah.
It's really about taking the time out, or going for the walk in nature. It's about doing the meditation. It's about taking the time to prepare a decent meal rather than shoving in something with a load of sugar and that's going to make you feel rubbish
Yeah.
for the rest of the day. So I think all of
Yeah.
those things is, it sounds really cheesy and you know, we talk about self-care a lot, and it's, it's bantered around a lot. Oh, self-care this, self-care that. But actually it's like, it's so important. I really, become a little bit preachy probably when it comes to this, because I just think you're going to show up in a much better way for your clients, for your family, for your friends, for your whatever, for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think I also can be preachy on it, but I think it's because it's worth preaching about, right? Like, and it's something that I think everybody can use the reminder, even if you feel you're doing it well. Um, sometimes it's that reminder to evaluate and see how you're actually feeling about it. Because I think a lot of the times we tell ourselves, oh yeah, I'm taking care of myself. Like just when people ask, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. It comes out, yeah, of course I'm taking care of myself. But when you're actually looking and doing an inventory of the time that you're spending on yourself or how you feel during that time, because a big thing for me was I was doing the things that were self care, but I was feeling like shame around it. So because of
Mm.
that, it wasn't true self care. It's like, I was going through the motions of saying, yeah, I'm taking care of myself, but I didn't, it was the attitude that I had when I did it that kind of almost took away from the self-care aspect. So I think it's so
That's
important
so
for everyone
fascinating.
listening to just do it. Yeah, yeah. I think it's important for everybody listening to do an inventory, like a self inventory, and say, like, am I making time for myself? And if you are, what is the mindset that you're doing it with? Are you doing it with, this is my self care time, I'm going to go and enjoy myself? Or are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling shame? Are you feeling resentment for not having more time? I mean, those were all feelings that I found myself sitting at the nail salon saying, why does this count as my self care? I don't really want it to. It's just the same as my husband getting a haircut, and he doesn't get to count that as self care. He gets a golf league, and I'm over here, but I feel like my nails have to be done for me to go to work. It's not fun. And it was just like this negative mindset that I was in because I really wasn't taking care of myself. And the nails are just an example when really the self care is so much more than I think the one appointment on our calendar. It's like, how are we really treating ourselves? How are we thinking about ourselves? And how are we thinking about what we're putting in our body? Like you said, are we putting junk food? Are we rushing around from meeting to meeting? Are we really giving ourselves the space we need to sit and reflect in whatever we're doing so that we can have peace with our day, or when we lay down at night, that we're having that time to decompress? Or are you just so exhausted when your head hits the pillow that
I agree. And I think if I see so many people suffering from burnout, unfortunately, and that's because I think there is this, or people put a huge expectation on themselves that they have to, have a really successful career or business and be a parent and
yeah.
this and that and good friend and whatever. And there are a lot of expectations that we put on ourselves. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, there's only so much you can do. We're all human beings, and I think something sometimes has to
Yeah.
give, and it's deciding
Yeah.
what you're willing to sacrifice a little bit. Because even if you have a really successful career or business, if you are absolutely shattered by the end of the day and don't enjoy the company of your children, what's the point? I mean, to
Yeah.
me, that,
Yeah.
I don't mean to be judgmental of how anybody runs their life, but if you've got kids, what's the point in you turning up or just being a grumpy parent constantly?
Yeah. Yeah. That is so good. I think that's so important for somebody to hear today, that if you are coming home and you're miserable, like, what is the point? Who are you doing it all for? And wow.
Do you know, it's really about going back to basics. And I think we can all get caught up in like this hamster wheel where we're just, you know, trying to achieve more, earn more money, keep up with the Joneses. And the
Mm-hmm.
Joneses keep
Yeah.
shifting, by the way. You've kept up with one
Yeah.
Joneses and
So
then there's
true.
the next Joneses. So I think
That's so
a lot of
true.
this, we can get caught up in this sort of treadmill, if you like, and it really
Mm-hmm.
comes back to basics and stopping to reflect, which not many of us do. Really just reflect on what is important to us. Is it more important to
Mm-hmm.
have extra money in the bank or to be a good parent to your child? And I'm not saying one's more important than the
Mm,
other. I'm just saying,
yeah.
it's going to be different for everybody, and what's important to you won't be
Yeah.
important to another person. And also what's important, or what might have been important to us 5 years ago, might not be important to us today. So it's
Yeah.
really about
Yeah.
constant self-reflection, just making sure that our actions are mirroring what we're actually wanting to achieve, not what we is sort of, doing subconsciously, the motions that we're going through. So it's just really being a bit more deliberate about what we're trying to achieve and aligning our actions with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you said about how what we want, what our priorities are over 5 years, how they change, I think that's so, so important because it can feel like we are locked into what we once wished for. And then once we get it, it's almost like this this feeling of like, oh, am I ungrateful because I achieved the goal and now I'm not fulfilled or now I'm not necessarily happy. But it is so normal for our goals, our desires, our wants to shift and change. And I think like what I speak about is really finding that deep why behind your goal. Because a lot of the times we're chasing after something that may dress up as one thing, but really we're going after something totally different. I shouldn't say totally different, but the real thing we're going after isn't the goal that we've set. It's actually the deeper why behind it that can appear in different ways. So, for example, like I came to Michigan on a lacrosse scholarship thinking that I really wanted to play a collegiate sport and that was the big why and that's what I and then I got there and I was like this is not it. And what I realized was what I was craving was that community and I was craving like a sense of achievement tied to community, which is why I thought, I had loved lacrosse, but ultimately what I thought I wanted, which was the scholarship, the thing I had been working so hard for so many years, was not truly what my deep why was. And I think that when we sit and we reflect and we look at the goals we've set in the context of the same journey, we can find similarities in those goals, and that's how we uncover the real why and the real thing that we're going after. Because a lot of the times it plays out as different things in our life, but really what we're going after is something that's on a much deeper level, like that community or stability, things of that nature. So I think that's really, really interesting. And I think when you talk with people about career moves, do you find that comes out, as people's
Yeah, I mean, what I see is that a lot of people end up in careers that they've sort of accidentally fallen into, or they've gone into
okay.
it because they were told to follow a certain path by a parent or a teacher, or perhaps they didn't really know what they wanted to
Mhm.
do, so they've sort of like stumbled from one job to the next. And then I
Yeah.
think the midlife crisis is a cliche for a reason. I think a lot of people do
Yeah.
get to midlife, and generally by the time you sort of hit your 40s, people have achieved, the house and the car and the kids. Not always, obviously, but huge majority of people get to a point in their life where they've sort of achieved all their extrinsic goals, let's say. and
Mhm.
and then there does come this a little bit of, I guess people are just a little bit disillusioned. Like you say, they were aiming for one thing, and then once they've
Yeah.
got there, they're like, actually, I'm not feeling that satisfied. And oh gosh, I'd rather not go to work tomorrow because it's not exciting me. I'm not passionate. I don't actually agree with the vision that my company has, etc., etc. So there's lots of reasons why people end up in a job where they do feel disillusioned and unmotivated and unhappy, quite
Yeah.
frankly. So
Yeah.
it's really just, again, going back to the basics and just taking time out and working out what is important to you now. Just because something was
Mm-hmm.
important to you 20 years ago when you started your career doesn't mean it's important to you now. So it's really,
Yeah.
it's kind
Wow.
of a process of rediscovering yourself,
Mm.
rediscovering what lights you up. What are you good at? What are you just naturally drawn to? What energizes you? What do you want to talk about all day long if you had half the opportunity? What is it that
Yeah.
fascinates you? What conversations do you want to be having day in, day out? Who do you want to spend your days
Yeah.
with? What kind of environment do you want to be in? Do you want to be surrounded by people all day long, or do you just want to be not curled up, but hidden away in a room by yourself, just writing your book or whatever it might be. So it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
just taking the time out to rediscover who you are and what makes you tick.
I love that. Those were all such good questions, and I think so important for people to really think about and spend time pondering, especially within the entrepreneurial space. I think it it is, so easy to feel like you're tied to one direction of the way you took your business originally. But I think it's so important to talk about the fact like it's okay to pivot. It's okay to follow those passions on an unconventional path because you never know where they'll take you. And I think so much of the time we get caught in the mindset of it has to look a certain way. And because of that, we miss out on opportunities to explore things that would actually end up being in alignment and there would be a way to incorporate them, but we don't let ourselves go there because we think, oh, that's not on the traditional path that I think is in front of me. So I think that's so important to think about and to constantly reevaluate and ask those questions, to not just do it once every 10 or 20 years, but to take time each quarter maybe or annually and review and reflect and see if you're still in alignment. And if not, make changes so that you don't go 10 or 15 years down the road and hate.
Totally. And I think sometimes people are hesitant to make a career change because they feel like they've invested all this time, money, energy into their career, and turning their back on it
Mhm.
will somehow signify failure, or that there's sort of
Yeah.
guilt wrapped up in that decision. And
Mhm.
I love to remind people that actually, that served you, that served a purpose. The role that you
Yeah.
that you were in, it's got you to where you are now. It's made you the person that you are now. It served its
Yeah.
purpose. And now it's
Yeah.
time for the next step, or not. Some people actually, I have this, I have a group coaching program that I take people through, and
Mhm.
I always say there are four possible outcomes. So you're either going to be a remainer. So that's somebody that actually, having gone through the program, realizes that actually I really like my job. I like the company that I'm working for. I like the activities that I'm doing, but they, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
they just got into a bit of a negative mindset, and actually just having a mindset shift made them realize that actually I quite like what I do. I'm just going to approach it. So that's tweaker. So it's somebody who realizes that actually they quite like what they do, they like the people, etc., but they just need to make tweaks to their existing role. So it might be that they work from
Mm.
home all the time, and actually they'd prefer to go into the office or a co-working space or something like that a day or two a week, just to
Mm.
get a bit of variety. It might be that they want to take on
Yeah.
more or less responsibility at work, or it might be getting involved in slightly different projects. So that's the tweaker. And then the third option is a toe dipper. So a toe dipper is somebody that goes, I'm fine where I am for now, but I know that the end goal is to get out. And in order to get out,
Okay.
I'm going to create a side hustle, or I'm going to start volunteering in the area that I want to get into, or I'm going to upskill, I'm going to
Mm.
do another university degree or college degree or whatever it might be. So they're literally dipping their
Yeah.
toe into new areas that they think they might like to get into. And then the fourth possible outcome is the leaper. So as the name suggests, it's somebody that goes through all the motions of reassessing everything and then goes, no, I know that where I am now is not going to serve me going forward. And I've got the financial backup. I've got the backup of all my friends and family, and I know what I'm doing. And I'm just going to take a leap of faith and go for it.
I love that. That's so cool. I love how tangible that is. And I love to hear your explanation of each also, because I think it is good for people to hear their options. I think sometimes we get so locked in on the black and white thinking of it's got to be this way or that way, when, like you said, there's 4 possible outcomes, not 1 or 2. So, I have loved this conversation. Everything you're saying is so valuable and so important. Can you share? I know you have a book that is recently out.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you, and I'm in awe of you, because actually, when I was your age, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. So I think to achieve what you have at your age, with 3 little ones in tow, I really take my hat off to you. You're an inspiration,
Oh,
and I
thank
wish
you.
you all the very best going forward. Um,
Thank
so
you.
you can find me. So my website is so the opposite of no, yescareercoaching.com. I've got all sorts of free resources on there for anybody who is thinking about possibly making a career change. My book is called Ready to Quit? ? And that should be available on Amazon, I think, in the US also. And my podcast is called Your Big Career Move. And like I said, I talk to all sorts of amazing people who've made fascinating career changes, from, a guy that used to work for Formula One who now roasts coffee for a living. I've got a guy that quit his corporate job, was living in Holland, moved to the other side of the world, to Bali, Indonesia. I mean, literally, like all sorts
Wow.
of amazing people with incredible stories to tell. So if you want to be inspired by other people's career changes, then check it out.
Wow, I love it. Well, thank you so, so much. I have loved this conversation. I am so happy and read your new book.
Thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Mom Boss Central. I hope you found inspiration, encouragement, and maybe even a few new strategies to rock your mom boss journey. Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. And don't forget to share the love with your fellow mom bosses. Make sure to join the community at mombosscentral.com. It's completely free and a space to connect with like-minded women. All you have to do is sign up and start connecting. Until next time, keep pursuing your passions and living authentically. We're so happy to have you as part of the Mom Boss Central community.